Again, my name is Rachel Sprague. I am the Director of Conservation for Pulama Lanai, the major landowner on the island of Lanai. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some work we've been doing to try to protect and allow for the restoration of seabirds on our island. So just to orient you, if you're not super familiar, we're there up on the island of Kauai. And this is the island of Lanai in what's sometimes called Maui, but in that complex. And while the island has experienced large-scale habitat degradation over many years due to mostly ranching, agriculture, that kind of thing, the island is still home to really large colonies of Hawaiian petrels and some other seabirds, but the Hawaiian petrels are primarily restricted to the remaining native habitat on the high part of the island. And I should say that the island has really only about 3,500 people live on it, and forest birds are essentially extirpated. So the fact that there are still these really large colonies of seabirds is really special. And there's a Hawaiian petrel because they're adorable. So a lot of the habitat is different for different reasons from other islands. The entire island of Lanai is below 3,300 feet. So when people talk about Hawaiian petrel habitat being like above 5,000 or 6,000 feet, our entire island is less than half that elevation. But we do still have a lot of the really steep ridges that make techs not happy trying to get into luhe that's undercut and dropping into a really deep gulch. But then other parts of it are like this. This is one of the densest nesting concentrations on the island, the Hi'i Ridge. And I don't know if you can see, but this is like a road going down to the Four Seasons Resort. This is former pineapple lands. And all of these plants coming up the sides of the ridge are non-native strawberry guava, manuka, albizia, eucalyptus. So with that really fragmented habitat comes the facilitation of movement of invasive predators into these really dense native habitats. And that is what we see. So these are some photos from 2016, which is the first year I started monitoring there. And we saw sort of the classic things that you see in a lot of places, like rats carrying away Hawaiian petrel eggs and chicks. This is a cat dragging a Hawaiian petrel chick out of its burrow. That pink, this is its beak and its tongue. And also predations not associated with burrows. Over the course of about 2 weeks, we found between Andre's team and from Kauai Seabird Project and ours, I think we found about 25 to 30 Hawaiian petrels killed on this one ridge. We hadn't even found any burrows there. So what that leaves us is understanding that while there's a lot of aspects to seabird restoration, habitat included, predator control is going to be one of the major things we need to deal with if we're going to allow for restoration on Lanai. And I should say that year that I showed you the photos of, that's our starting point, pretty much 75% of the nests were predated. So 75% of the nests failed. Many of those were due to predation. So you kind of got a couple options when you're thinking about an endangered species and protecting it. One thing you can do is protect known burrows. And another thing you can do is try to think about across the landscape, can you protect them where you think there might be occupied habitat? And so I'm going to sort of give you a little, hopefully convince you why, if you're able to do landscape level predator control, it can turn out quite well as it did for us. So this is just an example in my convincing. So this, when I first started, was the number of burrows that were being monitored with the help of the Kauai Seabird program. But we knew just from Jay's surveys and Fern's auditor surveys from past history and just logic that they were likely found across pretty much that whole area, everything that had native music forest left. And that assumption was borne out when just 3 years later, this is the burrows that we're monitoring across the landscape now. And even the gaps in that are still just because they haven't searched those areas. And it's not like the areas in down here is not necessarily because there's not birds down there. And so again, this sort of reinforces the idea of landscape level control if you're able to do that or able to start it from the beginning. Another reason is that, I know this is a terrible thing to say at a seabird conference, but it's not all about seabirds all the time. We have a number of species of endemic terrestrial snails on Lanai just one example of one of the special wildlife left, the kahuli. These are two listed species of Petrelina variabilis and Petrelina semicarinata. Both are only found on the island of Lanai. Both are endangered, found in 2 locations, that kind of thing. And we can build predator fences for them that are extremely small, like less than an acre. But when it comes to their persistence across the landscape, really rats are their most widespread predator. And it's not just about animals. This is an endangered abutilon in a fenced ungulate-free enclosure, and we're still seeing rat damage on, this is I'm sorry, I'm going to mess it up, Ko'olo'ula. So we went about this trying to think about landscape level, and primarily using traps for cats and A24 self-resetting automatic rat traps. And what this looked in the numbers, I'll show you first, and then kind of look at it, what it looked like over the landscape. We now are running about 145 traps across 10 miles of trails. Again, this was a slow ramp up, and I'll show you what that looks like. We're running closer to 750 self-resetting rat traps, because we're currently installing at the moment, across about 450 acres of Hawaiian petrel habitat. And when I say transects, you'll see what I mean, where it's really about the terrain. So this isn't going to look like a grid, but you got to think about where you can get to and where the animals might be able to get to. So first I'm going to talk about cats and what this looked like. Starting in 2015, green dots are the cat traps, purple diamonds are the known Hawaiian petrel burrows, and you'll see the number of burrows increase at the same time as we go from year to year in terms of what we were monitoring. So 2016, there was a pretty significant increase in where we moved the cat traps to. 2017 added some peripheral lines closer to Lanai City. 2018, we found a lot of burrows and also added additional traps over here. 2019, we're working on trying to fill in some of the gaps. These are some ridges where we, with cameras, can see trap cats moving up from Lanai City. This is just for the last year of cat captures. We caught about 90 cats. And what's interesting, a couple things, is that these trap lines around Lanai City definitely catch a lot. This is still about like a mile from Lanai City, and we catch a lot of cats. Ends of the Monroe Trail, we catch a lot, but this is a ridge that goes down to a really remote coastline, and I've been hiking on parts of the north side of the island that are like 5 miles from the closest road, and I see really young cats out there, some of the skinniest kittens I've ever seen. So we are catching cats around, anyway, in a lot of different places, and we're continuing. We caught more cats each year, putting in more effort, but there's still a lot of cats out there. And what's interesting is that even though we've been catching cats along this sort of more in the periphery, does that actually make a difference in the colony? And the answer is yes. This is the number of cat visits to burrows that are being monitored with cameras from 2016 to 2017 and 2018. 2018, that was just one cat visit out of, I think, 167 burrows that were being monitored with cameras, and it just actually walked by the burrow, didn't actually even investigate it. So this is incredibly exciting to see. So now looking at the rat traps, again, this idea of looking at them across the landscape. This was starting out with this sort of traps near burrows that we knew about. 2017, we decided to go landscape level. A lot more traps. Rats have a lot smaller home range. So 2017 looked like that. 2018, we also did a major expansion over here. 2019, we've already sort of increased density over in here and are planning on trying to get traps in on these ridges. Again, you'll sort of see there's slightly different strategies in different areas. Some places you can get into gulches, some places you can't. But again, did this make a difference for the predators? This is looking at rat sightings at burrows with monitoring cameras that are closer than 25 meters or farther than 25 meters from the nearest A24. And both Rattus and Exlons, we see fewer rats on camera when the burrows are closer to an A24. We still need to look at a bunch of other stuff related to the spatial movement, especially as the grid starts to be in for like multiple years at a time. But really what matters is not just how many rats we're seeing and how many cats we're killing or how many cats we're seeing at burrows, but what's the resource response? So just really quickly here, we're using a number of different methods. Right now, again, the number of monitored burrows has been increasing over the years. We're now monitoring about 370 Hawaiian petrel burrows using over 100 infrared cameras at the burrows, and that doesn't count trail cameras, which we use too, and also using sonometers to look at acoustically larger scale patterns. So this was what I mentioned, 2016 had about 25% overall reproductive success across the colony. And what we've seen just in the last 2 years is reproductive success overall this year was 78% across the colony that we're monitoring, which is just really exciting to see that big of a change. And if you want to learn more about some of the acoustics and geographic distribution and changes across years, visit Elizabeth Kane's poster. It's over there tonight. But it's not just about reproductive success. Again, we want to look at where the failure is coming from. So this is flipping that previous graph, looking at failures. And a couple things to note. One is that the amount of unknown failures has been decreasing over the years as our monitoring has been getting better. Cat predations have been going down. This year we had 0 that we knew about. Rat predations, also major decrease from 2016 to 2017. I think this increase here is just we had much closer monitoring and we're able to attribute more of the failures to something. And so rats is one of those. And one thing I found kind of interesting is that abandonment was almost more this year. And I wonder whether that is just because everything's not getting eaten, and so we're actually seeing more natural failures. But it also, there's going to be interannual variation also. And so breaking this down, so this is just looking at the cat and rat failures because it is just kind of a nice, just a good way of looking at things. You can see the number of cat predations at burrows going to 0 and the number of rat predations dropping really dramatically after we installed the majority of the grid in 2017. So where we're going with this, next up is to complete the A24 and cat trap expansions that I showed, or just filling in some gaps, especially looking to refine the rat trapping grid in particular. The spacing on some of the edges, I think, leaves a lot of the burrows still really vulnerable to predation by rats that are still hanging out outside the area that's being influenced by the rat traps. So looking a little bit more spatially at mapping where we're seeing predations, not just counting how many of them we found. And then this is sort of the most exciting, is that we've got funding in place and we'll be awarding a contract in the next 2 months to do an 85-acre predator fence around some of the densest nesting habitat with 150 known burrows and probably many, many more in there to be found. So hopefully this will help to contribute to being a core for the restoration of seabird, continued restoration of seabirds on the island of Lanai. So thank you so much to everyone who has helped us in the field, helped us with data analysis, data management, interpretation, thoughts, strategy, predator control strategy, and everything else. So thank you to everyone. I think there's probably time for a question or two. Yes, Makala. It is the same island with a cat sanctuary. Some of them go to the cat sanctuary. If we catch cats around the Lanai city, we have caught pets before, and generally those people have surrendered them to the sanctuary. Sanctuaries can be a tool. In this case, the sanctuary has doubled their numbers in the 3 years that I've been there, which makes it challenging to think about that as a only solution, which I think is what they would like to be, but yeah, I mean, we don't have unlimited money, even though the landowner is quite wealthy. And and it's still, convincing that this is the right thing to do. I feel really lucky that we've been given the opportunity to show what we think really needs to be done and have been given the sort of leeway to do that. We have had support from NIFWIF and others that, again, we've been matching, and it's less than half of what we're of the cost of our overall program. But it is, I feel lucky that I work for someone who really does want to invest and is going to trust us with decisions for what to invest in. And so, yeah, for that reason, it's, yeah. Yeah, it was a bit of an odd situation, and maybe Andre wants to talk a little bit more about it if he's in here. But yeah, there were a number of burrows where there were feral bees visiting it. You can see them on the cameras, and they're pretty much stinging the chick over and over, and the chick kind of comes out of the burrow. It goes off camera. It shows back up in camera, just looking wet because it had been like out all night, and so dealing with sort of exposure. On Kauai this last year, they also had a number of burrows, or where like bees set up a whole like hive inside the burrow, like there was honeycomb and everything, and killed the adults. So ours, it's in talking with bee people, it's really odd because they're like, ours were not full on swarms, but the swarms also tend to be more docile. When they're looking for a new home, they don't tend to just like kill anything in their way. So we're not sure quite what the deal was. This year we didn't see any issues at all. So I don't know. Any other questions? Yes. I think it's a good point that if you're doing control of one, you should be doing, especially if you're doing control of cats, you need to be doing control of rats as well. We didn't see a spike. We actually saw, I think, less rat activity. It's just we had an increase in the number of burrows that failed that we attributed to cat predation, but we had fewer unknowns. We were monitoring more frequently, and so I think rat detections can sometimes be hard, or rat predations can sometimes be hard to detect. So I think it's more that we knew more about the predations this year than we did the previous year. But we don't have the rat visitations for 2018. We don't have that analysis back yet because we were pulling cameras in December because they have long breeding season. So I think we'll know more a little bit later as we can really start trying to dive into like the rat activity a little bit